Hi, I'm Judith Trustone, co-founder of the Global Kindness Revolution and a project director for Kindness at Noon, every day, everywhere. If you want to know more about the whole project, you can refer back to our first uh, video blog. But it grew out of my work with prisoners, and we have distributed over 100,000 kindness cards in this country and in other countries, and we have a Spanish version in South America. The idea is kindness is the antidote to violence. Last summer, I was in Florida and I observed a dolphin rescue. There was a young dolphin that was on the beach, and people were gathered around it, and the rescue people came and they were putting cloths on it and keeping it wet, and they took blood to see if it was ill, and people gathered around, and it was so incredibly emotional. The tenderness with which these people treated this little dolphin was incredible. I mean, it was so emotionally moving. And they finally made out of some tarps, they made a sling and carried this little dolphin across the beach to a waiting truck. And they took it to SeaWorld for rehabilitation or whatever it is they do there. And this crowd of about 20 people, we'd been on the beach watching all this for at least an hour, maybe two. And as that truck pulled away, with the kindness and the love and the compassion and the caring for this little mammal, we all were crying. I couldn't believe it. I was crying, other people were crying. It was just so emotional. Then you look at the news, and I remember this particular night, it showed the body of a 3-year-old boy washed up on a beach trying to flee the violence in Syria. We all know what's going on with the whole immigrant and refugees, and it's so heartbreaking because we are all one. Our parents, our grandparents, all of us are immigrants to this country. The original Americans were Native Americans, and of course we pretty much wiped them out with genocide policies and politics. I'm very much involved with this because the co-director of the Global Kindness Revolution is an Afghani American man, Atta Arghandiwal. And he has written 2 books, Lost Decency, The Untold Afghan Story, talking about how he escaped from Afghanistan over 30 years ago, and eventually, as refugees are doing now, he eventually spent a couple years in a refugee camp and came here to America, where he worked his way up in the banking world and became vice president of a major bank. He's a humanitarian who has been working on the refugee crisis ever since he got here and was able to. He's one of the partners with the Global Kindness Revolution to Afghanistan, and there's also a large Afghani American population in California. Our other partner is Luc Goulet, who's our kindness ambassador to Canada and to France. And Luc's book, which is very interesting, is the Big Bang Theory, a blueprint for the future of the world. And it's quite interesting and really takes a long-term view of how we can change this dysfunctional, corrupt, mean system that we now have. A lot of politicians, mean-spirited, are really taking a hard line against refugees and sending them back. I want to give you some statistics right now on human trafficking. There's an estimate 14.5 to 17.5 number of people trafficked in the United States every year. It is a $32 billion industry, coming largely from war-torn countries where people are fleeing for their very lives. Many of them go into being sexual victims. 50% of the people trafficked into the United States each year are children. We have 60 million refugees, people without a home, half of them children. 800,000 people are trafficked worldwide every year, mostly from the East Asia and Pacific regions. So trafficking in America is approximately 700,000 people a year. 80% are women and girls. And in the book, I described the account of a young woman who was basically sold into sex slavery when she was 13 in North Korea. She eventually escaped with her mother, who was also sold into sex slavery. And eventually they found their way to South Korea. And she has written about this experience, and there's a reference to it on the website. So when we look at the lives that people are fleeing, it's unbelievable that we close our hearts and our borders to them. These are all human beings, and we are all one. Beneath our skin, we are very, very much the same. And because of where we were born and the political systems, which a lot of the roots of the political unrest and the wars are based on climate change, and areas that previously were abundant and plentiful are now arid and desert. So people really need a place to call home. So just imagine if you were a child, your father gets killed by whoever's killing people at the moment, and you flee with your mother. You spend all of your money, you sold everything and paid it to smugglers. You go across the water, you might drown, you might not. You land on a foreign beach, and then they want to send you back to be raped, murdered, or sold into slavery. And a lot of the people who make it, the sex traffickers give them a story about how they're going to get jobs and and they don't. They have nowhere to go. Nobody really advocates for them except the United Nations Refugee Committee. And it's a terrible, terrible thing. And by allowing these things to happen, it diminishes all of us spiritually. So think about your ancestors. I know when my ancestors came here from Italy, from Ireland, there were actually signs on places: no Irish need apply, no Italians need apply. Just like we had different drinking fountains for blacks and whites in the South. And if you want to know more about all that, I suggest Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow, if you really want to know about the conditions in this country. Okay, now I'd like to just take you through a visualization, again, to expand your sense of compassion. So first, give yourself space to relax. Take the 5 cleansing breaths. Think about kindness. And then imagine that you've just been born. You've been born into a family in North Korea where everywhere you're surrounded with government controls and government morality, police, and there's never enough to eat. At times, maybe your father could smuggle some stuff in. There's a big black market there. But you grow up with constant violence, people being murdered, people disappearing, people being jailed. So eventually, you grow up, you get maybe a 6th grade education if you're lucky. And then somehow, with the help of others, you and your mother escape into China. And you think you're escaping into freedom because that's what smugglers have told you. But when you get to China, you're sold into sexual slavery, and that's been the deal all along. So you spend many years trying to keep your sanity as you do one atrocious thing after another. Finally, you get to South Korea, where you are given a lot of support from the South Korean government for repatriation, where you finally get a taste of freedom. But you spent all of your life without enough to eat, dreaming of nothing but bread. Bread is what obsesses you, enough to eat. And when you get a loaf of bread, it is like nirvana. And then finally, you're in South Korea. You begin to heal, although who can ever heal from that much trauma? I think there's a lot of walking wounded people. And you go to university, you get educated, you write a book about it, and it becomes a bestseller. And that's listed in our book, The Global Kindness Revolution, How Together We Can Heal Violence, Racism, and Meanness. Thank you, and tune in next time when we'll be talking about race.